Betty White, damaged velvet, and handmade tools. What do they have in common? I'll tell you that in this video. I'm also going to show you the 3 main steps that vintage restoration requires. 1962. 3 kids, a divorce, and shoved tearfully in a forgotten cellar. Can this vintage dress be restored to its original glory? I say it can be, and I'll show you how. Velvet is one of the most unforgiving fabrics. You have to work with it differently using different methods and different expensive tools. I'm also going to show you how to make your own affordable tools. Step 1 of the vintage restoration process is to inspect and assess. So we're going to look very thoroughly over any vintage gown that comes across our studio to be restored. We're going to look and see where any of the damage has occurred, the type of damage, and we're also going to check just the general constitution of the fabric. Typically, if the fabric is severely dry rotted, that is a deal breaker. We can take the dress apart and use those pieces to use them like pattern pieces to cut out similar fabric and recreate the dress. That would be maybe our assessment in that situation. But we really just take it dress by dress. This gown actually has beautiful, beautiful velvet, and it looks like it got chewed up a little bit around the train, well, pretty severely around the train. And the inner lining, inner facing is definitely very, very damaged. We have to take that out. But when I look at this and I know that this bride was actually quite tall for the way the dress was cut to be worn, when I look at this, I realize that we can simply hem a little off the train and around the front and get rid of all of that severely damaged fabric. And so then the next thing I'm going to inspect is I'm going to look at the seams to see how strong the threads are. Sometimes the fabric is okay, but the threads are dry rotted. So I need to check all of that. I need to check the buttons. Often on vintage gowns, they have these tufted back buttons and they can dry rot a little bit too. So I'm going to look for those. Here I'm looking at stains, trying to make a plan for those. Well, you're probably wondering why I'm not using gloves to handle the gown, and that gets us perfectly set up for step 2, which is to clean the gown. So I would typically wear gloves to protect very fragile fibers from any types of oil or maybe my fingernail snagging on it. But these fibers, like I said, they're really not that delicate. They were damaged by mice and whatnot. The fabric is really not that delicate. So we're actually going to be cleaning this velvet. That's right. I'm cleaning the velvet. I am not including a lot of details on the cleaning. I'm going to let you watch the process, but I'm not including a lot of details just because this is open on the internet and every dress is different. And I don't want to put something out there for this dress, like specific solutions or chemicals or processes, temperatures, all that. And then someone take it as law and gospel for any dress and ruin some dresses. That would be terrible. So if you're interested in learning, though, how to become a professional cleaner of gowns, I do have a course on cleaning and box preservation. I will link to it below if you're interested in doing that. It's a certificate course, so that's nice. It really helps to diversify the revenue of your sewing shop. And it's also good for avid hobbyists who like to restore vintage gowns or clean fragile things. So here I am working over all of the fibers. You can see how dirty that solution is. It is water-based, but with what we add to it, it works out almost like dry cleaning. It's a very moisturizing process for the fabric. So it's going to kind of give the fabric a new lease on the life. I'm going to work out as much dirt as I can. Now I'm going to go back to the idea of having to test some things out and assess what we're going to do. I'm going to do a little bit of that when I'm cleaning. I'm seeing that just a little rubbing and a little sitting in the solution is not lifting these dark amber stains. I'm not surprised. Usually a amber or deep yellow stain is some of the most stubborn types of stains to remove. What I'm going to do here, though, is I'm going to take some out, some of the train that I know that will be removed from the dress, and I'm going to test scrub very gently. This is with a piece of bone, and I can see that the velvet is just disintegrating when I do that. So doing this in a safe spot that's going to be cut away anyways, gives me a great familiarity with this fabric. And I know now what the limits of this fabric is going to be in the areas that I need to keep. So this is very important to go ahead and do a little scrub test on some of the swatches to see what you can do. Now this does look like a normal bathtub. It's a little different. We have it set up just for the professional cleaning here. So you can see there's plastic all around it. The walls are waterproofed all the way to the top, and we have a really strong rigging system above this. So we have a pulley system, we have a rigging system, and then we have all of our chemicals in here. So this is actually in my studio. This is not like a home bathroom situation where there would be any shampoo or conditioner in the tub area. This is reserved for wedding gowns. Gowns are very heavy when wet, and you don't want to get injured. So you slowly raise the gown up out of the solution. You don't want the additional weight of that solution in the dress to tear the dress. So you need to check in on it as you raise it up as well. We go into that in like thousands of other details in that course if you would like to take it. But so we have a little pulley system that slowly and safely raises it up. If this gown was too fragile to be raised up while wet, I would have put this in a muslin bag that would handle the weight of it being lifted. We just have a few more steps to go in the cleaning process. Of course, if you don't want to clean the gown yourself, just take it to a reputable dry cleaner and they'll handle it for you. I'm going to inspect once again after cleaning, and there is that stiff interfacing that they used for lining on this dress that I said we would remove. It's almost like paper. So I went ahead and cleaned it with everything else, but we are going to take that out. So I'm just going to kind of look things over, and the fabric in general is so much cleaner. You can see this dress needs a lot of steaming and reshaping, well, everywhere, but particularly around that lace collar. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you some do's and don'ts with steaming or pressing velvet and this lace. And I'm going to show you how to make some alternative, very affordable pressing tools that you can use for velvet to avoid damaging it. Don't forget, Betty White is coming up very soon. During my sewing segment, I'm going to tell you her story. Using this part of the train that's going to be cut off anyways, I'm going to show you some examples. You can steam kind of far away, but do you see how I'm getting close right there? It left some stripes from the steam holes that are on the sole plate. Let me get a little closer so you can see. Those can be hard to get out. So I'm going to show you how to reduce that look if you were to accidentally do that. See how it came from those holes? That steam was coming out with enough pressure that it caused those fibers to lay down in that shape. A safer way to steam is to work from the inside of the velvet to keep some distance. And do you see how I'm flapping the fabric so it can have lots of air moving around while I'm steaming? That's a little safer. So you can see those stripes are still there, but they're not as bad. Again, I'm going to lift the back of it so that the air can pass through a little bit better. It's getting better. Now I'm going to show you something you really should not do. I'm going to directly press this velvet. So you can see that crushes the pile. All those fibers are crushed down now. So the velvet is, well, ruined. But what do you do if you were to accidentally hit it with the iron and you can't have the whole dress ruined? I'm going to show you, okay? So I just did like worst case scenario pressing, right? So let me show you how I'm going to work these two spots over using the velvet pressing tools. I'm going to start by suppling it up with some steam at a good little distance away. And I'm going to fluff it, make sure all of that gets moved around in there really well. Now I'm going to take some of the velvet from this dress. Again, another spot that is not going to be used. So that's right. One of the best tools that you can use to correct some type of damage that's been done to the velvet is the velvet itself. And you want to play with the nap. You know, the velvet goes in a certain direction. So you want to work both ways and see which way in the end is the best way to have it laying to look the softest and to reflect the least amount of light. Look at the difference. Can you believe it? It made such a difference. I love knowing this trick because it makes velvet just a little bit less scary. So, as I said, I would, if I was making something out of this, I would consider the velvet ruined. I wouldn't go ahead and cut it and make the dress. But if something happened by accident, it's nice to know how to fix it, isn't it? So now I'm just going to give it a soft dusting of steam all over just to get her nice and relaxed. Velvet boards are wonderful tools, but they're expensive. They keep us from accidentally getting a little too close to the velvet and scorching those marks into it when we're trying to train, say, seams to stay open or hems to stay rolled. Again, we don't ever want to press them crisply, but we need them to cooperate a little bit, right? So instead of having to go out and buy a velvet board, I wanted to show you how to make one. And I really like this design. It's more of a paddle, so it works great for seams. What I have is a 5-gallon paint bucket stir stick, and I'm using scuba fabric. That's the fabric that's got that super thin foam layer between the two other layers that are on each side of the fabric. And I am cutting that and stacking them one after the other. Ideally, we want it to be so that when it's pressed, there's only about 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch of the pin sticking through. Now, for the fun part. Take your pile of pins that are all relatively the same length and begin putting them through the stack of scuba. Now for the fun stuff. Guess who got married within months of when this gown was worn? Betty White. We all loved her. While I walk you through restoring this dress, I'll tell you all about her wedding day story. Betty White and Alan Ludden's love story is one of Hollywood's sweetest and most endearing tales. Betty White, a beloved actress and television personality known for her roles on The Golden Girls and The Mary Tyler Moore Show, met game show host Alan Ludden in 1961 when she appeared as a celebrity guest on his game show, Password. At the time, Ludden was a widower with 3 children, having lost his wife to cancer. He was smitten with White and began pursuing her almost immediately. White, however, was hesitant to enter into a new relationship, especially one that would involve moving to New York, where Ludden was based, as she was settled in her career and life in Los Angeles. Despite her initial reluctance, Ludden's persistence paid off. He famously proposed to White multiple times before she finally accepted. He even gifted her a wedding ring, which she initially refused, but later accepted. But she only wore it around her neck on a chain to show her growing affection for him. She was hard to get. Now I'm going to show you how to use this velvet board, and I'm going to use this on a seam. So you put the pile side of the velvet down toward the pins, and what happens is the pins kind of help hold the fabric up so that the pile can be nice and loose in there between the pins and the velvet that's on the stick. You still want to make sure not to crush the velvet against the stick. It's just something to give the fabric something to float upon. And you can see how nice that seam looks. And it saved you what? You somewhere between $80, $150, $200, depending on where you were looking at buying one of those. Now, another thing that you can make, very simple to make, is just a mitt out of velvet. And obviously you want to use a lighter color. This is kind of a medium light color. Ideally, it would be another ivory. But you're going to use this to stroke the nap in the right direction and heal over any little abrasions or tufts that have happened to the velvet. And it works wonders. That way you don't always have to have a spare piece of the actual velvet that you're working on. As I'm demonstrating here, you can even use this on hems. Again, you're making sure to just float over that turned hem. You don't want to crush the velvet even though you're using the velvet board. Now let's deconstruct the dress. Yes, we're going to deconstruct the dress because we need to hem it. We need to take it apart where we can separate out that interfacing layer. And we're going to reset the pleats. I don't know if this was homemade or maybe it was altered by someone at one point, but some of the box pleats are going in the wrong direction and they need to be corrected as best we can. And also, I want all the seams to be nice and fresh along the waistline. So that's what we'll be doing next, and I will get you caught back up to speed with our dear Betty. Betty White and Alan Ludden's wedding, held on June 14th, 1963, was a beautiful testament to their love and commitment to each other, marked by simplicity and personal significance rather than lavish spectacle. Now, in this area of the bodice, I am going to press directly on that lace. It had quite a curl. It had kind of been trained to curl out all these many years. And so I am pressing it and I'm doing this on the curve of the ham. And then I'm applying the tailor's clapper to really help it set in. And the lace looks just fine like that. So the next thing I'm going to do is, with the skirt having been removed, I'm going to mirror pin it. That means I'm going to line up each of the seams so that the skirt is pinned together with both sides of it mirroring one another. This is the best way to get a very even hem. Obviously, when you're hemming for humans, sometimes one side of the hem needs to be a little longer than the other because our leg lengths may not be symmetrical. But when you're restoring a gown and you're just trimming a little off, you want a perfect mirror on that hem. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about Betty White. I felt like some of these details about her wedding day were so endearing. Betty and Alan's ceremony took place in Las Vegas, a location chosen for its convenience and the privacy it afforded them away from the Hollywood spotlight. The wedding was small, intimate affair, reflecting the couple's desire for a simple ceremony focused on their love for each other rather than a grand event. Now, it's not just a statement or something that the press wrote about her. It really is true. When I was looking up pictures of her on her wedding day and researching what kind of dress she wore, who was the designer, I mean, she knew all kinds of designers, right? She could have worn just about anything on her wedding day. None of those details were there. If you do happen to know some of those details, please let me know in the comments. I would love to know about her dress and who made it. What was so interesting was I even took some time and I reached out to one of her stepchildren and asked him, do you remember the color of Betty White's wedding dress? Because you can tell in the picture, it's a floral. And he didn't. So all we have, they were so private about the ceremony, all we have are the black and white images from that day. And even her own stepchildren, or at least the one that I spoke to, was not aware of the colors that she wore on her wedding day. And history just kind of has a little smudge over who the designer was. That was just her personal thing that nobody else could know. It was special for her. And I thought that was really cool. Betty White, she was really cool. I put the pleats back together the way it was originally intended, so they would all match, and sewed the bodice to the skirt, finished the hem. Then I moved into the pressing room and put the buttons back on. I do want to mention something about this lace. Make sure you subscribe because I don't want you to lose track. My next video is going to be making this lace, because remember, there were some of those amber spots on the back of the skirt. We are in the third step of the vintage gown restoration, which is to repair and cover things that can't be either removed or replaced. So I'm going to make some of that lace to look just like it. And we're going to cover those amber spots. And the way we do it is we do it symmetrically. So wherever we put a piece of lace on one side, we're going to put another on the other side of the train. So I want you to see how I make that lace. So definitely hit subscribe so you can find me again. I'm so happy with how this dress turned out. It's so bright and clean and beautiful. And I'm like, wow. The friend of mine who gave me this, it was like, wow. She had a beautiful figure. Rock on. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. Be well.